What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about my heavily modified wired cruiser and the trial and error process that we've been on to get this thing up and running exactly how I wanted it to be. And I know it's been a while since I've updated you guys and made a video on this bike, but I wanted to make sure it went through a thorough testing process to ensure that it was reliable and didn't break down. I've also upgraded my riding camera setup and microphone, and I've been messing around with some cool camera angles while riding my e-bikes. So if you guys like that cool intro, please consider subscribing and liking the video. The Wired Freedom and Cruiser are great platforms for modding, and if you want to purchase this e-bike, check out the link in the description below. If you use that link to buy the bike, it helps the channel at no extra cost, and it would help me make more videos like this, along with help pay my e-bike quality control inspector. Let's quickly list off some of the main changes that this bike has gone through. Alright guys, so I'm going to go over all the changes I made to this wired cruiser, starting with the little accessories. Number one, mirror. Hafni bar and mirror, very important. It's a must-have for all e-bikes in my opinion. Got some ergonomic grips. We got a horn that also doubles as an alarm system, kind of nice. Got my bear spray, which works well for animals and humans. Hope I never have to use it, but I do have it in case I need it. Water bottle mount, I could put my wallet and keys in here. Obviously a water bottle here. Gub mount, amazing phone mount. This thing is rock solid, I love it. Got a rock rose bell right over here. Here's the horn that I turned on earlier. Got a repair kit down here with an extra tire tube, a bunch of tools, official license plate right here. If you're a Seinfeld fan, you'll understand. And of course, with the repair kit, you need a bicycle pump. This is a Garmin Varia radar, and this tells me when I need to actually look at the mirror when I am on the road. And this also blinks. The closer a car is, the faster the light blinks, which is kind of nice. So it gets the car's attention more than if it's just a constant blinking pattern.
So today was a day that the Garmin Varia and my mirror saved my life. I heard it beep, checked the mirror. I moved over into the grass, and had I not, he would have hit me. And as soon as he passed me, I looked up and he had his phone in his hand, looking down at his phone. I
did finally add new pedals to this bike. It's some AliExpress brand, CXWXC. Just got some black and silver ones. They turn very nicely. They're so smooth. Obviously the Cloud9 seat, very important. Next, let's talk about other things I've made, something related to performance. We got 203mm brake rotors. These are amazing. They look great and they help your bike stop great. Also, I got some in the back and of course one in the front. I just put these new tires on. I'll leave a link in the description. I forgot what they're called. I'll put them up on the screen, but these are so smooth. Obviously they're a little dirty because I've been riding in with them a bit, but these are so smooth. I love these tires. I think they look pretty cool also. And here we have the 60-tooth front chainring. I blacked out a lot of the silver parts. They're way too blingy for my liking, and so it looks better, more cohesive for the whole bike. I have this chain tensioner right here that helps a lot with chain dropping and the chain slapping around. Helps a lot, and if you can tell, it fits the 34 to 11 tooth rear freewheel just fine. This helps tremendously with hill climbing and top speed, especially top speed. So I can pedal comfortably at 40 miles an hour with this thing. And this gap right here, I'm thinking about closing this up. I'll probably make some plastic pieces later on and find a good way to seal that up, just to make everything look a little bit more cohesive. Now, let's get to the part you guys have been waiting for. In this housing is the controller. You guys have seen the videos that I made to it, all the heat sinks, the shunt mod. So this is a 3000 watt peak controller, 51 amps. There's a splash guard right here. I'm gonna seal up this top part right here to make sure it's really tighter and no water is getting down in there. But this is going to help splashes, anything that comes off the wheel, it's stopped in there, because down there I have an exhaust port which hot air comes out of, and down here, if you guys see, I have an air intake. Hopefully this is picked up on the camera, but I have an air intake that loops underneath, goes into the controller, and it intakes right there. And it's not perfect. As you can see, there's some wires in the way. I assure you that will not hinder airflow whatsoever. But the air goes in there. I'll put up pictures on the screen. There's holes in the bottom of this mounting. Air goes inside from when the bike is moving, and it just exhausts straight out sideways. So that's gonna help the controller stay cool. And inside the controller, I'll show you another video. I did a bunch of mods in there, heat sinks, new thermal paste, a bunch of stuff. So you guys will see that in a second. And now, 2 batteries. Obviously, this is a unit power pack battery. It took off all the labels. 60 volt, 25 amp hours, Samsung cells. This is the stock battery, 20 amp hours. So this will give me a total of 45 amp hours of battery. And this disconnects so easily. Quick link here, 3 on the sides, disconnect this right here, and it'll pop right out. And obviously I can take this one off as well, which makes it really easy for transport if you need to put it on a car rack. Or I could just run this with 1 battery only. I can take this off and just run it with 1 battery, and I have done that before if you're just doing a very short ride, but I just keep these on all the time. And I charge these batteries while they're on the bike. I also installed some DC switches right here. And so yeah, guys, that's the 3000 watt wired cruiser. I think it looks awesome. And that's everything that I've changed on this bike. There's probably something I'm forgetting, which I'll add in later. But for the most part, that's what we changed. The stock wired Freedom and Cruiser produce a peak of 2400 watts. The controller peaks out at 40 amps, 60 times 40, 2400. This one peaks at 50 amps, which means at 60 volts, that's just over 3000 watts. Now this is gonna make the controller pretty toasty. I literally had to build in an air intake and air exhaust to make sure this thing is cooled inside and out while taking on those extra amps. Secondly, the stock battery on the wired Freedom and Cruiser comes with 20 amp hours or 1200 watt hours of battery capacity. I added a second 25 amp hour battery right in the step through cavity, which now gives it a total of 45 amp hours or 2700 watt hours. That's almost as much as the 48 volt Anioki A8, which is advertised as a long range e-bike with 60 amp hours of range at 48 volts. Along with putting on smooth road tires and giving it high speed gearing so you can pedal comfortably at 40 miles an hour, not only does this bike have more torque than before, it can now deliver that extra power over a long range. It can climb hills faster, although shunt mods don't really give bikes more top speed. With the extra amps that the controller's pulling in, it can get to that top speed a lot faster and also maintain that top speed a lot easier. This wired cruiser and I have gone through quite the journey together. We've gone through many trials and tribulations, some of which have been successful, some of which
not so much.
But now I've tested all these mods for almost 100 miles of range climbing up hills, going off-road, taking it for top speed runs. I bought a thermal camera specifically for this project to make sure the temperatures were in range and the power that's produced is reliable and nothing's overheating. And for whatever reason, the motor temperature sensor in this bike seems to be disconnected. And so because of that, the thermal camera came in very handy, even though I wish I could see the internal temperature of the motor. I don't know why they made it like that. I'm pretty sure it's like that with all wired e-bikes. I went through 2 motors and 2 controllers and it was like that on both of them. And make sure you guys watch till the end of the video because I'm going to announce what the next video will be regarding this bike and which topic we're going to focus on. I think you guys are going to like it a lot. So stay tuned for that announcement at the end. Okay, so now let's get into the details of what exactly was changed on this bike and how I made this bike produce more power, how I added the dual batteries, and everything else that I changed on this bike. Let's jump right in. Believe it or not, it's actually pretty simple to do these mods, and I think most people could probably make this exact same e-bike if they wanted to. So that being said, I'm gonna leave links to everything that I used below, or everything that I could. Some things I got from China, AliExpress. I had to talk to representatives at Unit Power Pack. But everything else I'm going to leave in the description below so you guys can check out the links. And again, if you guys want to build a bike like this and modify your own existing wired cruiser, you'll have all the information and all the links available. And all these links, of course, help the channel at no extra cost to you. Out of all the e-bikes I've tried so far, the wired cruiser has been my favorite. It's a great platform for adding modifications and making it exactly how you want it to be. I wanted to add a second battery. I thought the wired cruiser was perfect because it has a giant step-through cavity in the center that's perfect for one of those Unit Power Pack triangle batteries to fit right in. So after test fitting some pieces of cardboard, doing some measurements just to make sure the battery could fit, I reached out to the people at Unit Power Pack and customized the battery specific to my needs with the type of cells that I want and the type of BMS that I needed. And they sent that battery over for $500, which I thought was a pretty good deal. And so far it's been holding up just fine. Next, I had to figure out how to mount this battery without a top tube because typically the battery is mounted from all 3 sides, but I couldn't mount it from the top because I had no top tube. To my surprise, the mounting brackets that I made that allows the battery to sit snug over the existing stock battery provided plenty of security along with the straps at the bottom and in the back to make sure this battery sat tightly in that step-through cavity without any issues. No rattling, doesn't move at all while I'm off-roading, even going over logs in the woods. And best of all, this battery was easily removable. I just undo the quick latches that I installed on the triangle battery, disconnect the battery, and then I can obviously easily remove that along with the keyed stock battery. 6 amps of charging going into 45 amp hours of battery. This makes it light for transport. I can easily put it on my car bike rack for carrying, knowing that it's not too heavy for the actual hitch carrier. And I can also keep the batteries safe and sound inside my car while transporting the e-bike. After this, I wanted to figure out the best way to connect these 2 batteries using a battery blender. So I did some research on different devices out there. At the time, I was intending on making this bike run at potentially 80 nominal amps, maybe a little bit higher at peak. So I needed a device that was able to handle high current, maybe 90 amps, maybe even 100. I thought of making this e-bike dual motor, so I wanted to make sure that both motors had plenty of power from the batteries to make sure the BMS fuse inside the batteries don't burn out. I saw that Datex2 does make a high amp battery blender, but then I saw the price that they were selling this high amp battery blender at, and I couldn't believe my eyes.
You serious?
$482. That's almost as much as my entire second battery. Are you kidding? I reached out to the guys of the company. They couldn't give me a straight answer as to why their device was so expensive. The only thing they said was, oh, it has a little bit less voltage sag than some of the other blenders, and are you gonna trust these other devices? Are you gonna trust your life and your house? A lot of fear mongering when it comes to telling me why their device is better than other devices. I asked them, what exactly is inside that's so expensive? Do you guys literally add gold into this device? And they could not give me a straight answer. So I went with a different company. I went with just a generic Chinese blender that was able to run at 100 amps at peak. If you guys do want to build this yourself and you're not going to do the shunt mod, I'd recommend going with the Fusion battery blender. I think they have a very reasonably priced product. It looks like it has a built-in heatsink as well. And I think overall it's a great value, much better than Date X2. You can actually do a small shunt mod and use this battery blender at the same time. On their website, it does say that it supports up to 50 amps. I also added two 40 amp DC breakers that are connected to each battery. And the reason why is while the batteries are charging, let's say potentially one of the chargers fails, and I didn't want the battery blender itself to be stressed out while trying to prevent that backflow. I don't know if the type of BMSs that are in these batteries can accept charging through the same wires that they discharge through. So just to be on the safe side, I added the DC breakers. Not only that, it helps prevent arcing for the stock battery. When I switch off the DC breakers, the stock battery won't arc when I install it inside the bike. All I have to do is flip the switches on the DC breakers, and inside each breaker is an arc extinguishing system that helps the longevity of the entire circuit. And all these parts I tried to wire in as nicely and as neatly as possible right over the crank in the corner of the frame. Now for the fun part. The shunt mod. A shunt mod pretty much tricks the controller into taking on more amps than it's programmed to take on. The stock wired cruiser peaks at about 40 amps, and after the shunt mod, it thinks it's taking on maybe 20 or 30 amps when it was actually already at 40, thus allowing itself to take on even more amps and then giving you more watts into your motor. If you guys saw my part 2 video of this entire project, I put a lot of solder onto these shunts, more than I should have, and this controller ended up peaking at 61 amps, which at full charge made almost 4,000 watts. At 60 volts, it would have made 3,600 watts. I thought the controller would have been the weakest link since it does get very hot, so I added a lot of different heat sinks to some of the components, along with adding thermal paste between the MOSFETs and the controller housing. During a hot summer day, while stress testing the bike, the motor stopped producing power. I thought I burned the controller out because certain parts on it weren't lighting up under the thermal camera, and they were before. I was wrong. After getting a new controller, I learned that it was actually the motor that had the issue. Turns out there was one little blue wire inside the motor that somehow got disconnected, and that was the problem. So after getting a new controller, plugging it in, and realizing it still didn't work, I knew it was probably the motor that was bad. So I ended up getting a new motor core, and it was interesting to see what a brand new unused motor core looked like versus a motor core that had almost 4,000 watts run through it. You could tell that a lot of the plastic pieces that held the wire spindles together were melting from the heat that the 4,000 watts created, along with a darkening of the copper wires in the motor, which indicated that there was a lot of heat and current being pushed into the motor. I posted pictures of this motor on the DIY Ebike Facebook group, and some people even said that this motor looked okay. In a later video, I'm going to try and reconnect that one little blue wire and see if the motor works. But that's for another day. I put a new motor core into the housing, put the clutch pack back on, re-greased the gears, and boom, we're in business. So after learning that my modded controller that had all the extra cooling and heat sinks in it were okay, that's the controller I decided to use. I was able to remove some of the old solder that I had added onto the shunts with a copper solder wick and some flux added on top. I brought this controller back to stock, and maybe even a little bit below stock speeds. 39? Aww. And from there, I slowly added a little bit of solder at a time right on top of the shunts until the controller got to a peak of 45 amps. And then I added a little bit more because I can't help myself, and I wanted that magic number of 3000 watts at 60 volts. So now we're getting a respectable 51 amps and making just over 3000 watts at 60 volts. If you are doing this shunt mod, make sure you get a clamp meter and measure how many amps you're going to be pulling through the controller. It's very important because you don't want to end up like me with a burnt out motor. Using the clamp meter is very simple. You just zip tie it to the bike and put the clamp meter around one of the wires that's coming out of the battery into the controller. And from there, you set the clamp meter to read the maximum amperage that's being drawn, and that way you'll know exactly what the power of your e-bike is. Based on my previous thermal testing, I saw that the controller gets very hot, even at stock speeds. So what this meant is that if I wanted to reliably deliver this power without the controller melting on me, I had to not only cool the outside of the controller, but also the inside. What I ended up doing was cutting holes at the ends of the controller and then added black foam just to make sure nothing falls in. And then with the controller housing, I added more holes where air can go in and exhaust out. The bottom has an air intake scoop that helps scoop air in that's rushing by the bike as you're riding, pushing all that air into the controller. With that, plus the fact that hot air naturally rises, it's exhausted from the top of the controller at the sides that's covered with a splash guard to make sure no water is splashed in from the tire. This way, air is not only pushed around the controller, but through the controller itself, keeping it very cool while you're moving at high speeds, pulling all those amps through the controller. This controller is now much cooler than it used to be because before it was in a housing that almost seemed like it was airtight. There were no holes in it, there was no intake, no exhaust, and the controller was just baking inside of the controller housing. At 40 amps, it's probably okay, but at 50, I wanted it to survive. I don't know if it would have been okay in that near airtight box. Now, I know what you guys are saying. This controller is now susceptible to water getting in. I am never riding this bike in the rain. Even if there's a chance of rain, I'm not going to ride my e-bike, mainly because I don't want to be in the rain while I'm on my e-bike. I don't want to get wet. It's not enjoyable for me. Therefore, this bike will never see rain ever, ever, ever. And it has the splash guard that I'm probably going to redesign and make even better. That's going to help keep this controller protected from water that's splashed up by the tires. Yes, I know I could just add the fenders, but I don't like how they look. I like how the bike looks without fenders. That's just the price I have to pay. So far, I've driven through multiple puddles and the controller's held up just fine. No water got in. But like I said, I'm still going to be redesigning it just to make sure it's even more water resistant. I'm also debating on whether I should stick to my original plan of having two side panels cover both batteries, including all the wires that's at the corner of the frame, to give it a more cohesive and cleaner look. Similar to how the Stealth Bomber clones have those side panels, I might do the same thing, but that would just add something else that I would have to take apart if I do remove the batteries and have to transport the bike. And it would also add a little bit more thickness and bulk to the center of the bike, which I don't know if I want to do yet. Maybe I'll test out some parts, but that's for another video. But for the most part, this bike is essentially finished and complete. I originally wanted to put in some POV riding footage in this video, but the video ended up being way too long. So there's going to be a part 2 of this video with this bike in action along with my commentary. So in the next video I'll be uploading, we're going to be doing a range test with this dual battery system. We're going to be doing some hill climbs, top speed runs, and overall mixed riding to give you guys a better idea of what the range is going to be like with this bike, just in case you want to build something similar. And at the time of uploading this video, that second part is not ready just yet, but if you do see a link in the top right hand corner of the screen, that's the link to the second part. Feel free to check out that video and see what the range is like on this e-bike. In that video, I'll film a lot of the testing that I did with this bike, and I'll talk more about how it performs, how it climbs hills, and things to watch out for if you do want to build this type of e-bike. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know it took me forever to release this final part of the Shunt modded dual battery wired cruiser. I went through a lot of difficulty and trial and error in figuring out what was broken, what was okay, how to put everything together, and then finally going through all the testing required to make sure this was actually a reliable mod. I hope you guys liked the video. Let me know in the comments below what you think. If you have any questions on how you can build something like this yourself, please let me know in the comments below and I'd be more than happy to answer them. I answer all of my comments and I'm gonna keep trying to do that for as long as I can. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one.